Hello, welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. Happy October, and that means happy Halloween. I am Hurinfan, and I am joined by Little Red Book.
Hello.
We have read two spooky stories this month, and our first story is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Full warning for all listeners, we'll be doing full spoilers for this story, but personally, I think this book's plot isn't that important, and to me, this story is definitely more about the atmosphere. Uh, LRB, have you read other Bradbury stories?
I've only read Fahrenheit,
Ah,
so this was my
yes.
first time.
uh, Bradbury is primarily known as a short story writer, and I've read Fahrenheit 451 and The Martian Chronicles and Something Wicked This Way Comes. That's the only three I've read. But yeah, even The Martian Chronicles was just a collection of short stories. So let's get into the summary. Something Wicked This Way Comes is about two boys leaving boyhood, about a father who feels too old, and about a creepy carnival that steals people's life force run by the autumn people. The antagonist of the story, well, let me quote Bradbury and what he says about the autumn people because I thought that section was really, really cool. Uh, for these beings, fall is ever the normal season, the only weather there will be. Here, let's restart that. Something Wicked This Way Comes is about two boys leaving boyhood, about a father who feels too old, and about a creepy carnival that steals people's life force run by the autumn people, the antagonists of this story. Let me quote what Bradbury says about the autumn people. For these beings, fall is ever the normal season, the only weather there would be no choice beyond. Where do they come from? The dust. Where do they go? The grave. Does blood stir their veins? No, the night wind. What ticks in their head? The worm. What speaks from their mouth? The toad. What sees from their eye? The snake. What hears from their ear? The abyss between the stars. They sift the human storm for souls, eat flesh of reason, fill tombs with sinners. They frenzy forth. Such are the autumn people.
I just,
So I,
it's his
sorry.
prose is so great.
Yeah, I think that's what I enjoyed most about this story,
Yeah.
and I think that quote perfectly shows what kind of story that Something Wicked This Way Comes is, and what writing style he uses, because the whole book is exactly like that. Like from the opening where he talks about October, and October is a boys' month, and the prose is more about giving a general feeling and a general atmosphere more than anything else. Not that I
Right.
didn't like the characters, because I particularly identified with the father, but our
Which
story
is
starts
weird
out.
because you are not a dad.
I am not a dad. I'm trying, but yeah, not there yet. But lately I've been just feeling old, like my best years are behind me, and I can't
God, I
really do
hope
things.
not.
I
I'm going to be 41 in a couple days.
I know, like I know I'm not that old, but I just when you work with kids,
This is
well,
true.
our story starts out with our two protagonists sitting outside their homes. They live right next to each other, and they're born 2 minutes apart on Halloween night. And
Halloween Eve and Halloween
was it Halloween Eve? I thought it was Halloween and
All
all
Souls Day.
also yeah.
No,
Anyway,
it's the 30th and the 31st.
okay. And it's Jim Nightshade and his friend Will Halloway, and they meet a uh, lightning rod salesman. What did you think about that scene?
Um, it kind of set the mood for the book. Um, he's semi clairvoyant, you get the feeling, the lightning rod salesperson.
Mm,
And he he goes up and he touches Jim's house and says something about how Jim is basically attracting lightning. And one of the things that I found really interesting about this is that Jim, he has his mother's a widow, and I want to say there were three other children that all
mm,
died, and that's never
yeah, yeah,
talked about. But there's just something about Jim that attracts trouble.
yeah.
Which is
He's
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
he's kinda like, I don't know, growing up like a boy and growing up like a girl might be different, but he's kinda one of those friends that is always kinda wanting to do a little bit of mischief. He's not like a bad kid, but maybe he's gonna break into that abandoned house, or he's gonna
Right.
maybe find the dirty magazines and I don't
Definitely.
I was definitely more of a Will child instead of a Jim child, but I had a few Jim friends. So yeah.
It is a little bit different from, girls growing up. Girls are more passive aggressive. I'm gonna get all the I'm gonna get everybody mad at me. But girls are mean and mischievous in different ways than boys
Mm,
are. And we don't tend to go for the physical. That's actually another thing I really liked about this book is because it felt like a window into boyhood, like a window into something that I didn't get to experience because I'm a girl.
mm,
Does that make sense?
mm.
Um, this is gonna be a really weird comparison, but it reminded me of reading, Soup and Me. I don't know if you've ever read those books, but it's about 2 little boys in the '50s that live in a semi-rural area, and, I just like that picture and the masculinity. And there are
Uh,
basically no female characters in this book, by the way. I
yeah,
mean,
there's Jim's mom, and they talk about her for like 5 seconds. And when we learn about Will's mother, it's really just Will's father talking about how great she
right.
is, and she does seem like a wonderful woman.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, that was one of my questions for you. Is like this book is definitely more about being a boy and being a man and what that means. And I was wondering, yeah, as a female reader, if that was influencing your uh, enjoyness. Is that a word?
It you know, part of the great thing about books, and that's also something else this book is about, is that it allows you to experience things that you don't ever get to experience.
Hmm, I agree.
Um, and of course, I also have 2 sons, so, but I really enjoyed this dichotomy where it was like you have this guy who's almost an old man, and you have these 2 kids that are on the brink of manhood, and the way that, like, Will doesn't really know his dad's a person. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And I think we've all had that experience in adolescence where we realize, "Oh, they're actually a person, and they have a history, and they have things that happened before I was here."
as a
And that
kid, that
really
that you don't think about that at all.
no, you don't. And he's right at that age where you start to realize that sort of thing about your parents, which is something I also found very interesting. And that is actually a universal human experience, I'm pretty sure. I know I had it,
Mm.
when I mean, even your parents telling you stories when you're a kid, you don't really believe that they happened because you weren't there. Does
I
that make
no,
sense?
kids are little narcissists and they only care about themselves.
Yeah,
And
this is true.
growing up, they have to learn about other people, and that starts with their parents usually. And no, I thought Bradbury, he because of his style, he conveys ideas and emotions incredibly well.
Mhm.
And the moment I think that uh, Will realizes that his father is a person, as you say, was well, we'll talk about that later because that was my favorite scene in the book.
Okay.
um, actually, since we're talking about themes of boyness, I'd like to quote the beginning of the book. Do you remember the opening?
Yes, but please
Okay.
read it.
First of all, it was October, a rare month for boys. Not that all months aren't rare, but there be bad and good, as the pirates say. Take September, a bad month. School begins. Consider August, a good month. School hasn't begun yet. July as well. July is really fine. There's no chance in the world for school. June, no doubting it. June's best of all, for the school doors. Spring wide and September's a billion years away. But you take October now. School's been on a month and you're riding easier in the rains, jogging along. You got time to think of the garbage you'll dump on Old Man Prickett's porch, or the hairy ape costume you wear to the YMCA the night of the month. And if it's around October 20th and everything's smoky smelling and the sky orange and ash gray at twilight, it seems Halloween will never come in a fall of broomsticks. and a soft flap of bed sheets around corners.
So good.
Yeah,
And
I
it
think
sets up the feel of the book perfectly.
I agree.
So,
All right, so I'll try to continue my synopsis.
okay.
Um, so the boys buy a lightning rod, and the lightning rod salesman says, "Hey, lightning's going to strike one of your houses." Do you remember which one he said it would strike? I think it was
Gems.
Jim. Yeah, that was Jim.
Oh, yeah, never mind. That's not a spoiler because it's in the first, like, 5 minutes of
Oh,
the book.
I already gave full spoilers. It's fine.
Okay.
Uh, did you? What do you think the lightning rod salesman was talking about?
Trouble? Just trouble.
See, I think the so Jim dies.
Yeah, I know, right? That was
So,
that was real. Actually, several people die in this book.
yeah, but like our protagonist dies, and we'll talk about how that's resolved later. But yeah, I think that's what the lightning rod salesman was talking about, especially specifically the carnival.
Right.
So the carnival comes to town a few days later, or was it that day that they found out about it?
I think it was the next early morning at 3 in the morning.
So this carnival is incredibly creepy,
Mhm.
and it feeds on people's. We would probably say they feed on people's souls, but really what they have is a carnival that, or not a carnival, a carousel that when you ride it forwards, it sends you into the future. Your body, it sends you into the future. If you ride it backwards, you turn back into a child. 1 year for every time around, right?
Revolution. Yeah.
Yeah. And the carnival is run by a bunch of creepy people, especially Mr. Dark, who is just covered with these tattoos, and the tattoos have like images of people in the carnival, and he could like give them like orders, and like he could like talk to them, and they could do stuff. And I loved Mr. Dark. Did you like Mr. Dark?
Oh, he was great, and there's several parts in the book where, um, they talk about how it feels like the tattoos are staring at them,
Mm,
Will and Jem, and how it feels like a menagerie is looking out at them from his tattoos, and I thought that was really cool imagery.
I agree. This book is filled with lots of really cool imagery, and with the imagery is those beautiful words that we've been talking about many many times.
Yeah.
So the boys witness this, and they're trying to tell the adults, "Hey, this carnival's creepy, and don't go there." And nobody believes them. And they see some people be changed into children. They see some people die from old age, and they run away from the carnival. And the rest of the book is basically the carnies trying to capture the boys, right?
Right.
And Will finds his father. His father is very old and very wise, and he's like the only one that believes them, right? And well, it goes like that for a while. We see a lot of scary scenes, and then eventually we find the boys. How did it end? I forgot. So the father.
Well, the father confronts Mr. Dark in the library, and,
Mm,
um, Mr. Dark is looking for the boys who are hiding in the library, and there's this really cool scene, where he's, like, walking through the stacks, and he's saying, "Where are you boys? A for adventure, J for, gem," and, which is just fabulous, and then, the gypsy witch, speaking of, this is something we should mention. They use the word gypsy a lot in this book, and some
mm.
people may find that offensive. Heads up. Uh, I don't think it's referring to the ethnicity of gypsy, though.
It,
I think it's just
even if
a
they're not, they're still throwing that.
word around that's very sensitive these
Yeah.
days. um, so the gypsy witch attacks the father and basically is trying to give him a heart attack while Mr. Dark is hauling the boys off.
Mm.
And the father learns that the way to defeat the gypsy witch is through laughter.
Specifically, smiles, right?
His smile is how he kills her.
Mm.
And so you said feeding off souls, and I think that's part of it. I actually think that the carnies are feeding off human misery. And
Mm,
there's several scenes where the father's talking about all the miseries that we create for ourselves, like how we create our own little hells for ourselves. Uh, Whether it's like a married couple that won't split up, but they just enjoy being cruel to each other, or how gossip works. Just we create our own little hells, and that's what the carnival feeds off of. That's the feeling I got from the book.
mm.
I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know what your reaction is to that.
No, I agree. I think there are a lot of times where Will's father is talking about evil and what evil means. It was exactly that. It was just people being mean to each other, people uh, not being kind to each other, or people. Uh, it's really almost all of it. He said was just from people, and then these autumn people, which I think is beautiful,
Mhm.
feed off of that. And you're right. But yeah, he kills the dust witch, right?
Right.
With a bullet, and he drew a little moon on it, right? It was supposed to be a carnival prop trick where they
Oh, it
shoot
was.
a. It was supposed to be, but it didn't end up that way, right?
Right, right. Well, what I'm saying is that the trick actually went off like it should have, except that this wax bullet that's
Mm.
used in that trick has the smile on it.
Yeah, so he drew a smile and it killed the dust witch, which is really cool.
Yep.
And later, let's
He
see, Jim.
shatters the mirrors with his
Mm,
laughter. He goes into the mirror maze and he sees himself getting older and older and he feels like he's being attacked. But Will just telling him, "Dad, I love you. I don't care about your age. I'll love you no matter what." And he starts laughing and shatters all the mirrors with his laughter.
uh, that
This is
reminds.
a really good book for this year, guys.
It's a really, really, really good book. I like the scene a lot when Mr. Dark was trying to tempt what's the
Jim.
father's name? Jim. No, no,
Oh,
not Jim.
no, Charles.
Charles. Thank you. He was trying to tempt Charles. He's like, hey, you could ride our carousel and you could go back in time and say you could, what? How old are you now? Maybe you could be 30. He's like, okay. And so he starts counting down, and Charles is not taking any of it. He's like, okay, well, there goes 30. Okay, next 31, 31, 31. No. So he just keeps going up and up and up. He's like, you could use this time to spend more time with your child. Like he wants them to give up the boys, but I think Charles is a wonderful character. Well, before we go, we start to the rest of it. How did you like the book?
I loved it. I really
Yeah.
did. It was beautiful. Uh, like you said, it's not super strong on plot, but um, just the feeling of it, that feeling of growing up or getting old, um, that turning of the seasons of the book, and like I said, the discussion of how we hurt each other on purpose and what that does to us as people. One of the tricks of the carnival is that turns you into whatever your vice is.
Mm,
So you have all these characters that are like you have the skeleton or whatever. And Charles surmises that the skeleton is the skeleton because he withheld nourishment from his family,
mm.
both spiritual and actual physical nourishment. Maybe that's why he's a skeleton. So I really like the playing with the themes there. But I also really like the mischievous nature of the book. Like they sneak out of their house. They have rungs nailed to the side of their house and they sneak out at night and go do things. Um and it just has this at the same time it's wrestling with these things. It has this innocent fun to it that was just great to read. Um and Will goes out and fights the Dust Witch with his Boy Scout bow and arrow that's like it's just so cool. Um it's definitely I have one major criticism of the book, and that was the dialogue. When the boys are talking, if I had to read the word or hear the word "no" one more time, I thought I was gonna bang my head against the wall because they are
Is
always
that your
saying,
mother
"No,
talking?
no." Yeah, when they're talking to each other. "No, don't do that, Will. No, don't do that, Jim." I'm like, "Stop. saying that. Just like, ugh. Um, yeah, not strong on the dialogue. And then when Charles is talking, he gets a little bit monologue-y. So
Oh,
that's,
the monologue parts are my favorite parts.
I mean, it's kind
No,
of the
no.
same thing I have with Robert Heinlein. I mean, the monologues are they can get a little preachy and whatnot.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's
I just
like,
I just like the way that Charles talks, though.
yeah. Um, so I have a quote I want to read.
Go ahead.
Give me a second. Over the years, they had tuned the walk, prying up an A board and nailing it here, lifting up an F board and pounding it back there, until the walk was as near unto being melodious as weather and two entrepreneurs could fashion it. So they have this boardwalk outside their house, and they've actually changed the way the boards are nailed down so that they can play songs to each other.
Yeah, it's really cool.
What? It was so
Honestly,
there's just this little moments where they so you can picture them all summer. They've been dancing on this boardwalk, playing "Oh Susanna" to each other and going out on their nightly escapades. And I just love that image. I don't like the idea of my kids sneaking out of the house. Don't get me wrong, but I could see why. Um, you know, it has this certain appeal because I also remember being that age and staying out too late and worrying my mom. And anyway,
those are the good days.
yeah, I don't have a mom to worry anymore, unfortunately. So,
So about we've talked a lot about the writing style, and I think we both enjoyed it quite a bit. But in many ways, this book kind of feels like a YA story, right?
mhm,
So like it feels like proto YA, but at the same time, it's a bit of a contradiction because of its, I would say, unappealing writing style, especially for children. So the whole time I've read it twice now, and it kind of feels like a proto Goosebumps, right?
right.
But its themes are very, at the same time, very adult, while also very childish. And I don't know, it feels like a children's story, but I don't know if children would really enjoy it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think that I could see reading this to a kid, and I could see giving it to a middle schooler to read, a precocious middle schooler.
Mm.
Um, I don't think it's too hard to read. I just don't know how well it translates to modern audiences, if that makes sense. Um, it definitely has. It's very stylized. So, um, but I think a kid who reads Lemony Snicket could read this and enjoy it.
Oh, yeah, they're kind of similar at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, I never read Goosebumps, so I don't know. But
Maybe we could
a
do
kid who
Goosebumps next year for
reads,
Halloween.
huh?
So maybe we could do Goosebumps next year for Halloween.
So a kid who reads maybe scary stories to tell in the dark might enjoy this book, except it's a little bit
Oh,
longer.
I love those. Those are so scary.
One of them gave me like I can't remember. It's the one where the preacher goes into the haunted house. Um
I don't remember.
anyway, I it gave me horrible nightmares for like 6 months after I read it.
Those book covers are the scariest things.
I know,
Like
right?
those
We're talking
are
about book covers in our audio format again.
I think anybody who's ever read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark know exactly what we're talking about
Yes,
because
that's true.
those book covers are terrifying.
Yes, they are. But I think that yeah, for a certain kid, this is very readable. And you're right, it has all these really mature themes, and but that's what makes good children's literature too. I mean, think about Coraline, um, by Neil Gaiman.
Mm.
They made a movie about it.
I've seen the movie, I've never read the book.
Yeah, right. So I mean, that's or the Graveyard Book would be another example of his writing that has some pretty scary, mature themes in it, but is very digestible for kids. And I just think that we sell our kids short a lot. We don't expect enough of them in their. I don't want to sound because that sounds like I'm being judgmental. What I'm saying is that we aren't willing to give them challenging material when we should,
Hmm. No,
because
I
we're
agree
afraid.
completely.
So it's almost Hemingway-esque. Like it's got really short sentences throughout the book, except for when Charles is talking. So it's not like you're giving your kid these crazy complex sentences to read, that you have to like freaking diagram if kids even diagram sentences anymore, which I doubt they do.
I definitely
I know my
diagram
kids
sentences.
did. Huh?
I definitely did. Um,
My kids did, but
I think in that aspect, the sentences being short is the only way that this resembles Hemingway.
no, I 100% agree. I do not like
Okay.
Hemingway. I'm not a fan. I'm just saying that it kind of had that little touch of that feel. Because
Hmm.
Hemingway's the same way. He writes really short sentences and then he writes a really big long one.
Hmm.
So,
I actually like Hemingway, but that's it's another time.
well, I can't help it. You're wrong. I'm sorry.
So, what was your favorite scene in the book?
When they first go into the library, the very first time at the very beginning.
Oh, when they meet their father, the janitor, and he's just, I don't know, kind of
So they go into the
lamenting his
library
age.
and they talk about how you're going into a factory of different worlds and how, here's the librarian carrying off, you know, this book into Tibet and just how the way the library is taking these Midwest country boys basically and showing them the world. And
So it conveys the feeling of a library pretty well.
yes, because I like libraries, which is probably why I'm on this podcast.
I like libraries too, but man, the libraries here are terrible. I walked to the largest library in my prefecture, and I went there, and there were no novels.
What?
Like they had a good English section of a decent one for Japan, but all of their Japanese novels were I couldn't find them anywhere, and it was flabbergasting.
Did you do you read Japanese as well? Just out
Hmm,
of curiosity. No. Okay.
yeah,
I thought so.
yeah, whatever. So yeah, my favorite scene was also the library, but it was the second time. So when Charles is hiding the boys, and they're waiting. I guess they're just waiting for Mr. Dark to come, and Charles just starts talking, and he won't stop talking. And you talked about it earlier when he's talking. He's making theories. I think he's just talking out of his ass. I don't know if it's true, but
Right.
he's making theories about like, oh, maybe he's fat because of this, and maybe she is old because of this reason. And he's trying to put their sins with their image. And I don't know how I really feel about that, but I just love the way that Charles talks, and the boys are enraptured by his words. And I think Will says my favorite line in the book, and he says, "I didn't know you could talk, Dad." It goes on for pages and pages of Charles just talking to the boys about the Autumn people, and talking to the boys about love, and talking to the boys about sin. And uh, I I loved it. It was my favorite part.
Could I tell you my least favorite part?
Was it that scene?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Yeah,
It
go
was
ahead.
the very end, and Jim is dead, and Charles starts slapping Will around to get him to laugh. I mean, that was the
Yeah,
weirdest messed up scene
that
ever.
was really weird.
I'm like, "So you're smacking your kid and telling him to laugh?" Like, I don't know. I don't know how well that will play for modern audiences, like, at all. It
I
might
don't
be.
either. Like we didn't grow up in the what was this supposed to be, the 30s, the 20s?
I think so. It was definitely, based on, okay, so it was published in '62,
It was based on Bradbury's childhood,
but it
right?
was based on his childhood, so it had to have been the '30s.
I don't know what it was like back then, but if my best friend died and my father started hitting me and telling me to laugh about it, I would not respond the way that Will did.
Right. They were made of
So
sterner
yeah,
stuff back then.
his friend sitting there dead, and Charles is like, "Ha ha 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 ha! We gotta laugh! We gotta laugh! Ha ha ha!" I was like,
Yeah,
"Wait, what?"
I kind of felt Jim should have stayed dead. I'm sorry to say. I know I'm
Oh,
normally a big happy ending person, but that did not play with me at all. Or he shouldn't have been as close to death or something. I don't know. Like I didn't dig that.
well, one part of me is like, well, you shouldn't hit your kid, but another part of me is like, hey, if you hit your kid, your friend's no longer dead, so maybe it was okay. Maybe Bradbury's saying, yeah, if it's life and death, hit those kids. I don't want to read into it too much, but yeah, that part struck me.
Oh, yeah, probably not smacking your kid to make him laugh. That was just weird. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this book.
Me too.
I like
I just have one. Sorry, go ahead.
okay. I was just gonna say I like the part where they're hiding under the street during the parade.
Aren't they in
And
the gutters,
yeah, they're
like it style?
yes. And then Charles is talking to Mr. Dark and they're standing right above the boys. And Charles just stands up to him. He's like, "Yeah, you can find me at the library." And he talks about how his because it's they talk about how Charles is short. He's not a big guy. He's a little guy.
Mm.
Um, and Will has this realization. He's like, "I've never seen my dad look so tall as when he stood up to Mr. Dark." And so I like that image too. So
Yeah, 'cause I don't like this trope in a lot of fantasy, just in literature, like tall people are just better than short people,
right.
or like leaders are tall, or that kind of thing. And I'm not tall. I'm not a leader either, but it kind of always bothered me that like they they give these things that have really nothing to do with each other. But yeah, his father, Charles, is not even a librarian. He's the librarian janitor.
Right. And he's the hero.
Yeah, he's very old, but he's incredibly wise and he wants to be a really good father, and I think he is.
He's not very old. He's 57.
Oh, he's very old for a dad of an 11-year or 12-year-old boy.
Okay, that's fair.
Like it's like especially in the 1930s, and
Yes,
even now that would be quite old for being a father of a boy
that's
that
fair.
age.
I'm just pointing out
Okay.
that 57 is very old.
No, he is not, but that's almost as old as my father. Uh,
Currently,
and
you mean?
yeah, my father I think is 60. Yeah, he's 60 now, and he has grandchildren. So,
Right. That's
um,
true.
well, I have one last question for you. How did this story make you feel?
Hmm. It There was a couple parts that were really terrifying. Um, but it made me feel very pensive. There's a scene where Charles is up at 3 in the morning and he hears the carnival coming in and he has this whole interior monologue about how waking up at 3 in the morning is the worst time to wake up.
I almost put that in
And
my
I
quotes.
Yeah, I'm a horrible insomniac, and I have tons of issues with sleep, and I wake up at 3 on a regular basis, and I found it interesting that because he's also talking about how his wife is sleeping peacefully and all this stuff, but I connected much more with Charles than I did with his wife because
Well,
I've had almost all those same thoughts, except for the thoughts about not really being a father to the child that I think obviously my kid ca but it was interesting because he talks about how mothers always know and fathers never do, for sure. I mean, we do now because you carry the child inside of you. It's pretty obvious. I have the stretch marks to prove it, you know what I mean? Like, and I thought that was interesting. I wanna know what your reaction is to that. That
to what?
to that idea that women, um, produce life and they know, and they are kind of this trying to think of how to put it because I can't remember the exact quote, but um, that they are somehow more connected to their children than men are, and more
Um,
connected to the future because of it.
I think there's some truth there, but I also think behind that uh, idea is old-fashioned gender stereotypes.
Okay,
Like people have always said that women become mothers when they get pregnant, and fathers become fathers when they first meet their child, or something like that. And I think there's definitely a closer relationship that mothers have with their children simply because they did carry them, and that's a big deal. And they understand the weight in both senses,
literally.
yeah, of having those children. But I think behind that idea is this idea that mothers are better parents, and I think especially in Japan, where these old-fashioned gender ideas are still even more so uh, forced upon society, that
Right.
men are not supposed to show emotion towards their children, and they just need to be their providers, and they don't need to give them anything else. And that bothers me, but I think there is some truth there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does. I wasn't saying it so much that I think I don't think that Ray Bradbury was trying to say that women are better parents, just that they have a very different connection to their children than men do.
Oh, and I agree, but I just think that that hits close to an idea that I don't. I'm
Like,
not. Yeah, exactly. Like I don't think he's saying is wrong at all. I just think
and
it,
yeah. And there are definitely women who are not good parents at all.
and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, there's women who don't feel connected to their children. And that's actually something they talk to you about when you're taking your, pre-birth classes is that there's women who don't react, like, instantly to their children.
Mm, and that's
Um,
fine because that's part of postpartum. Well, let's move on.
yeah. You're right. We cut this all.
This is a tangent. All right.
We're t and Kip's gonna be sad he missed this because he would have
Yeah,
loved
he
to
is.
have words about this.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I don't know what I'll keep in and what I won't.
Mm,
Well,
we'll find out.
this story made me feel nostalgic and melancholy and hopeful and made me feel love. I think we've talked about it over and over again, but Bradbury has a way with words and conveying emotions, and I think he's really good at making you feel these things and
Yeah,
remembering. I think he's good at making you remember a time when you felt these things, if that makes
right.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It did make me wanna read Dandelion Wine,
I've heard that one's very good. I
but
want to
it
read that
takes
as
place
well.
in the summer, and it's also has a similar type setup for the book, for the story. So,
Well, is that it?
I think so.
All right, so that has been the Legendary Greed Team, me, Hurinfan, and my friend Little Red Book. Please, if you enjoyed the episode, come and join us on mostly Discord, but I guess you could send us a line on Reddit, but I'm never there.
I'm
And
not either. Not
yeah,
anymore.
it's
Huh.
always Discord now. And I'd like to say thank you for Horizon Brave for starting this thing, and goodbye.
Bye.
Music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks.